So anyway, Charmin asked me if I would talk a little bit about myself and our farm and what we do and how we got into it, and then maybe let you ask some questions. But my name is Janice Felker, and my husband is Rick. We own Mattawoman Creek Farms, and we've been farming here since 2005. We've owned our property on the shore since the late 1980s, and we moved over here permanently started farming in 2005. You heard me bantering or talking a little with Hannah. I was the youth services librarian here on the shore for about 4 years. And before that, I was the librarian at Broadwater Academy. So that's a little bit about me. And then, of course, we've been farming all that time, too. So hang on, I've got to say got it because it's recording me, evidently. Charmin didn't tell me that. All right, here we go. So this is a slideshow that my husband and I put together a long time ago, and then we kind of change it every once in a while. And it just helps me to go through and make sure I kind of tell you a little bit about the farm. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on every slide, but I just thought it might give you something to look at today and to maybe spark some questions. Okay. So that's our logo, and we like to believe we farm for health. When we started this, Charmin asked me how we got started, and I guess we got over here. My husband said, you know, I'd really love to farm this land. Nothing has been farmed on it since we bought it in the 80s, and we knew it was really clean, pristine land. And so we said, you know, if we're going to do this, let's do it organic. That way, we're keeping our land healthy and clean, and we're keeping it a clean environment for us and anybody that works for us. For some reason, my slide is not progressing. Hang on. There we go. That's a picture of our farm from above. And if you look out beyond the farm, behind where the Mattawoman Creek runs, you can see, hope you can see my cursor. But anyway, if you can, there's the clam beds. My husband also raises clams out there in the creek behind the farm. All of those beds that you can see are permanent raised beds. Wherever there's a bed, we haven't driven a tractor directly over the land that we plant in. In all the years we've been farming, those beds stay there all the time, and they just get refurbished and cleaned up, and something new planted, and we rotate the crop. We're going to look at that slide again later because it shows us something else that we do, but it's being kind of slow here. Now we went past all of them. Well, my mouse is working better than my cursor. So anyway, there's my husband and myself. We're proud that we've been doing this for 17 years now. Here's a sample of some things that we give out when we do our CSA, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that program in a minute and how that works and how we got started with that, but that just shows you some of the things we grow. We have an online store. That's a way we sell our produce, and I just did a quick picture of that this morning to show you that and show that's something we do. We didn't do that from the very beginning. At the beginning, the first year we only sold at the farmers market in Cape Charles, which was just in the parking lot across from the hotel there, which was not fancy at all at that time. It was just on pavement. And we were one of about 3 or 4 vendors that showed up every week, but we stuck it out and we did it every week for that summer. We were lucky to take home $100. So it was a slow start. But then after that, we moved to the CSA profile, and I'll go explain that now. That's where people choose to join your program, and they get a bag of veggies from your farm once a week for the period of time that you set out. And at that time, we were doing just a summer CSA. We now do CSA program throughout the year. But that way, you know, you have a customer, you know, your product has a home, and it makes for easy planning for a farmer. And it was a program developed, I believe, back in the 70s to help small farms survive, because it's really hard when you grow a lot of things and you don't know for sure if you have somewhere to sell them. So it's kind of a commitment on the buyer's part to get produce from you on a weekly basis, and they pay you up front to do that. So that's the program, what's the word I'm looking for? That is the system of sales that we went to soon after we got started. And that was at the suggestion of a neighbor of ours right here in the area we live in on the base side of Eastville, where our farm is. And she said, you know, where I lived before, they had CSAs and they were really popular and they did well. You guys should do that. And we really didn't think it would take off. But the first year we had, I want to say we had 60 some members, which was outrageous for us. And only about 15 of them were in Norfolk. The rest were right here on the shore, which surprised us greatly. We thought everybody on the shore had their own garden and wouldn't want our produce, but that got us started. And now right now we do about 120 at a time. At the peak of doing this, we would get up to 200 and some customers at a time. But we've actually scaled back a little bit in the last couple of years, mainly because of COVID and in the difficulty in getting employees. So anyway, then we moved on to also adding the online store, which is now another way we sell things. There's a picture of Mattawoman Creek from out on our pier. And that's looking out toward the bay from our side. That's my grandson, Henry, and Henry loves cucumbers, so I couldn't resist sharing that picture. And then we usually tell everybody a little bit about what organic is. I don't know if you guys are that interested in that or if you already know, but I'm just going to slip through it quickly and then we'll talk and you can ask some questions. One of the rules for organic is that you are maintaining and improving your soil health constantly. So a lot of what we do has to do with getting our soil to be healthier and healthier. And that is what we've seen in the 17 years we've been doing this. It's amazing how much less input it takes to have a good, healthy soil for us at this point. We use cover crops every year. That's a main way that we get fertilizer back in our soil. Way over on the right here, you can see it's still fully growing. It's a mixture of winter rye and vetch. And we mow that down, till it into the ground and let it begin its decay process. And that's what feeds our soil. And that's the main thing we do for fertilizer. We have a couple other organic things we use, but that's the biggest thing we do is doing cover crops. We rotate our crops. It's another thing that the organic program requires is that you rotate your crops. That's, again, a part of keeping your soil healthy, but it's also part of keeping your insect pressure down because it confuses the insects. It also breaks the cycle in disease transmission. So every year, everything gets rotated. And you'll see right here, we've got beans growing right next to tomatoes. In some of the other pictures, you'll see even more crops. Here's a picture of the this is where we left some of our cover crop in. And the reason is that you can see the purple vetch growing in there with the winter rye. We leave that in. This is called a farmscape bed. And we have one about every 7 or 8 beds in the farm. And then we also rotate those. But that bed is mainly left there to be a break to help deter the spread of disease and the spread of pest. But because we're leaving it there and not growing on that, it becomes a fallow year. That means nothing gets grown on it other than that. We often let that cover crop grow quite rigorously until it starts dying off. And that helps control erosion on that bed in the meantime too. Also is nice for the insects, and especially the friendly insects that we want to keep near our farm. And there's one of those friendly insects. Our neighbor keeps bees. And then we have, I guess that's more like a garden bee or a carpenter bee, but we have lots of bees around. There's lots of diversity on the farm. We have a lot of tree frogs that help control our insects. And you'll see we have a nice buffer all the way around our farm. And that was just luck. That's the way it was. The land was when we bought it. And but that big buffer of trees that surrounds the farm really helps protect us from any, I guess it's like a spillover or wind carried pesticide or chemical fertilizer or anything that might be used on other people's property. And that's a requirement with organic growing too, is that you do have some buffers, or if you don't, you have to go further into your land before you start growing. You can't grow right on an edge that could be exposed to pesticides. So you'll see along the road here, those cedars that look small, they're huge now. This is a fairly old picture. And that we also have an even better buffer along that other road. So we started creating our own buffers out there on those two edges where we didn't have them naturally, but we were lucky to have a lot of buffering already. We always use organic seeds. There is a rule that if you can't get organic and there's something you really, really need or want to grow, you can get untreated seed, and that's allowed in organic. We find that that seed had a parent who was organic, and so it's going to be more prepared to grow well in the conditions that we want to grow it in. So we make our own rule that we only use organic seed, but no one growing organically can use GMOs or any treated seed. So if you can't get organic, you can only use some untreated seed that you might find, and you have to show that you've looked lots of places to get it organically before you're allowed to buy it otherwise. So that's another rule in organics. And of course, no chemical pesticides. One of our pesticides is these cute little ladybugs. They're great at eating aphids. And we have a lot of them on the farm. We also have a lot of barn swallows, and they do a good job of eating a lot of bugs. And we have a lot of bats, and they're helpful also. And then as far as weeds go, my husband uses this, what they call a lily weeder. Believe it or not, these little tines on this weeder can go right over top. You can see where it's going right over those little spring onions. And it'll dance right around them as it comes up to a plant, and it will kind of rough up the land and take out any of the small little just beginning weeds that are just starting to pop up. It helps clear the land, and that way you have a way to weed. As long as you develop too far, this machine is absolutely wonderful and saves a lot of back-breaking, hoe raking of this crew. And that's an example. All of those beds were lilied. They were weeded that way by my husband when we plant it, several times after planting. And then it gets to a point where you can't any longer, but that's how pretty the beds look and how little weed. And you can see we do have weeds, because at the end of that bed closest to you there, you can see some weeds growing. But what he did with that lily pretty much kept him out of the crops. So it's a great method. Some other organic standards. One of the main ones that has me busy, a big part of my time here on the farm, is keeping very complete records and tracking everything, even before some of the food safety issues that are being faced right now and dealt with. Ever since organic began, you've had to be able to track all of your product that you create, whatever produce you grow, has to be able to be tracked all the way back to the beginning. So right now, if we sold today, my husband's delivering a box of lettuce, and that box of lettuce, I can tell you exactly when it was harvested. I can tell you exactly when it went in the cooler. I can tell you exactly when it was planted, or exactly what bed it was harvested from, and when it was planted in that bed. I can tell you when that bed was planted out of the greenhouse, when those plants were actually put in that bed. And I can tell you when those little transplants were first started from seed. And I can tell you where we bought that seed and when we bought it, and all the details related to that purchase. And so everything we sell can be traced all the way back to the seed that it grew from. And that's a requirement in organic and always has been. If you're a farm that grows both conventional and organic product, you have to go through a lot of special rules about making sure you don't commingle. So that's why I have that no commingling in there. We don't have to worry about that because we don't grow anything that's not organic. You have to stay in control of all your produce containers. And that's one of the hard things. People have a really hard time. They're always trying to bring back containers to us and say, don't you want to use these again? And we would love to use them again, but we can't once they leave our farm, and we don't know what they've been exposed to or what might have been used by that person. We can't reuse. So we can't reuse little pulp pots or things like that. Everything has to be cleaned thoroughly if for some reason we feel like it could have been contaminated. And so we have to keep control of that. There's some pretty tight restrictions on the use of raw manure. We don't use any on our farm, so we don't have to worry about that. But that is another thing that a lot of people don't know about organic. You can't just throw raw manure out on the field. And that's true of any farming good practices. And then there's no use of pressure treated wood, and that makes for some interesting things that you have to deal with to have woods that will stand up as in the form of stakes that we buy. All our stakes for our tomatoes none of them can be pressure treated. They all have to be clean wood. That's our organic certificate. We have that, and we have an annual inspection. You can see that effective date when we first began was September 08, 2005, and we get that every year. Let's see. And that's just a picture of our crew out harvesting. We used to rent some farm from the Galabarts down at the end of Old Town Neck here in Eastville. And that's actually down on their farm. We transitioned their farm from conventional to organic. And it still is organic as far as I know, because nothing's been grown on it since we stopped using it. But we did grow on it for a while. As a CSA for every season, that's what we do now. We have our CSAs all year long, and that's an example of how we pack the boxes and get them ready for delivery. There's a sample of the newsletter I send each week. On the left, it has a list of everything that's in the box, and on the right, I usually have some tips and some recipes. There's a picture of what was in our box so far this year. Look at those crazy carrots. People always ask us about those. First time we tried growing those, we grew them from transplants. That means we started the little seeds in little trays, and we pulled them out and planted them in the ground once they came up. And that's what a transplanted carrot will do. It starts curling really early if it's not in the ground, in open ground. And it doesn't matter that you transplant it. It still does these crazy things. So we took them to the farmer's market the first time we grew them like that. And we told people, I said, well, we guess this experiment's over. We won't try this again. But people loved them. And they came back the next week and said, we want more of those crazy carrots. So we still grow them that way in the time of the year when you can't just plant carrots directly in the ground. We start them as transplants in the cold winter in our greenhouse and then put them in covered facilities. So we can come back to this one later, actually. There's our corn. That was one of our great successes, is to be able to grow corn organically. It's not easy. We lose a lot, but the ears we get to you guys are really good. How are we doing on time? There's our beans and some tomatoes, some tatsoi, which is rather unusual Chinese cabbage, but delicious. And there's where we grow in the winter. There's the high tunnels and the low tunnels that we grow in. And so during the winter time and early spring and late fall, we can grow all the cool season crops that you would usually grow like in March and April out on the land, the kales, the collards, the bok choys and cabbages and things like that. And there's a picture within the tunnel. And I'll tell you, that's a really fun place to go this time of year when it's on a cold day, because it's always warm in there. Feels really nice. And there's again a picture of the crew planting. There's these were covered hoops out in the field that got snowed on one year. And so we took a picture of them covered. And so they had the cloth over them that we put to protect the plants. And then the snow hit on top of it. And then in the next picture, you can see how the plants looked after we pulled the covers off. So everything survived. It was a great way. At that time, we were growing a whole lot more outdoors under those hoops before we had as many of the tunnels to grow in. Now we don't do as much of this because that's a lot of work putting those hoops out and then pulling them all back in at the end of the season. And there's a picture again of the creek and the end of my presentation. I'm open for some questions if you guys have any about the farm or anything else about me or what we do. I also brought some things out to share with you about preserving and keeping your food. Charmin's always asking, we talk about that a lot when we meet. I'm in the Food Access and Equity Committee of Healthy Communities and with Charmin. And so we do a lot of talk about food and taking care of food and getting food to people. And one of the things we talk about is preserving food and keeping it to last. And there are a couple of things I've told them about, and I thought you guys might be interested in too. I'm gonna stop the screen sharing for now, but we can come back if you have pictures you want to see again. And I'm gonna actually show you guys some things. So this is a tomato I froze, and a lot of people don't realize you can freeze these whole like this. It's a really cool thing. I chopped out a little part right here that didn't look too good to me, and I took the core out, and then I just threw it in a Ziploc bag and froze it. And it might be warm enough. What I do is when I take them out of the freezer to use them, I just run some warm water over them, and I just dipped it in warm water. And then you just start peeling back the skin like this. I don't know if you can see it coming off. But you can peel it, and then you've got a peeled tomato ready to throw into soup or anything else. That's kind of a cool little trick that we learned here on the farm. My best trick was taught to me by one of our shoppers at the market. This was basil. So when you have more basil than you can use, you put it down in the bottom of a Ziploc bag, squish it down in there as tight as you can get it, and then you roll it up like this. You zip it tight and put some rubber bands around it and throw it in the freezer. And when you need basil for soup or pizza or whatever you want to put it on, you pull out this basil sausage and you just chop it off while it's frozen. You can use it in anything. And then you put it right back in the bag, which you're not using. You can see the leaves falling off. But you can put it right back in the bag and keep it. Every year I do this, and so we have basil all year long. It's not the same as, fresh, but it's almost, and it's great on a pizza, great in a soup. Can't miss it. Is that my timer?
No, that was my phone. I'm sorry.
And also, one more thing I'll share with you guys. We didn't get to chat. I talk too much. Peppers, frozen solid. Didn't have to do a thing with them. Ready to use. I'm sorry I talked as long as I did. Anybody have a question?
You're fine, Janice. You're fine. Yes. I was just going to say too that you can freeze bay leaves like that as well. I've done that before.
Oh yeah, probably parsley.
You use one like once every 6 months or something, and they always come a million in a little jar. So
yeah,
you can freeze them too. That helps keep them fresh.
Hi, Janice. This is Karen. I do have a question.
About
the tomatoes. So you said you just took out the core. And you can cut any pieces that might be, not look really good.
Yep. Okay. I just cut off like that one. I think probably had a little stink bug damage right there at the corner, and I just cut that out too, and made sure everything and I wash them before I do it. I wash them and dry them, and then I do the trimming, and then I just put them right in that bag, throw them in the freezer, and you can just take out as many as you need.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you, because you can't do multiples in one bag, not put them like a singular bag.
I usually put like 10 or 12, 16 in one zip bag, and then I just take out what I need and zip the bag back up and leave it in the freezer.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And it's a whole lot easier than canning if you have the freezer. And actually, I think they taste better. The flavor's really, really good.
That's a good idea. I've never even thought about that. I wasn't sure if you had to blanch them first before you froze them like you do with some things, or
the
what?
only thing you blanch them for is to take the peel off. And I had read somewhere that, if you just run the frozen one under that warm water, the peel will just slide right off, and it sure enough does. And it's so much easier to take it off that way than trying to do all that blanching and all that. And you lose a lot of tomato when you blanch and take your peel off.
Yeah. And that might be something, Janice, I might get up with you to get some tips like those to send out to our general membership and to put out maybe on our Facebook page as we are moving into spring. And Janice and I advocate all the time about growing your own food. Granted, I'm not very good at it at all, but I'm also never home to eat it, so I don't feel like it's that horrible. But I do know that, that is one thing that we advocate for, especially right now with the cost of everything rising, is to grow your own food. To buy one tomato plant, yield 50 tomatoes or whatever the case may be, versus having to buy those 50 tomatoes at the grocery store. So that's definitely a good tip for folks, especially if they plan to grow their own, and how to make them last longer. Because I know when I buy tomatoes, I'm super excited to have them for like the first 2 days, and then I forget I have them, and then they're gone. So it would be, for me, that's a fantastic tip for me. So thank you for that.
I think having a freezer, some extra freezer space is really smart if you're going to grow your own, because almost everything can be frozen now, and they're good, easy tips that we can share and that people can find on their own on the internet too. But I think you're right, Charmin, that if you're the hard thing is growing just the right amount and having it come in at just the right time for yourself. So if you're doing it for just yourself, it pays to be able to preserve it in some way so that you can spread it out over a longer period of time.
Awesome. Does anybody have any other questions for Janice?
I have a quick one. Hi, Janice.
Hi, Roberta.
I'm assuming that when you do the tomato, I love the idea of freezing the tomatoes, but it seems like that works best for using them if you're going to put them in something that is going to be prepared, like a soup or a stew, but that it would probably change the texture of the tomatoes if you're not going to do it with a cold mozzarella and tomato salad, right?
No, but I will tell you what I have done that turned out beautifully. I did one time you always, with frozen product, I've also learned that it's better not to let it thaw all the way out before you start trying to chop it, if you're going to chop it.
Okay.
So if you're going to chop a pepper that you've frozen, you want to, after about 2 or 3 minutes, maybe even not that long, you want to take the end off, slit it open, pull all those seeds out of the inside while they're still frozen, and they come out so easy. And then chop the pepper while it's still a bit crisp from being frozen. Okay. But the tomato, I did that once. Done it more than once after I did it the first time. But I let it thaw just to the point where I could run a knife through it. Mm-hmm. I sliced it really thin and laid it out on a pizza crust.
Okay.
Used it in lieu of pizza sauce. I made like a fresh. It was actually used basil and tomato and mozzarella or something like that on top. And oh my goodness, it was absolutely undescribable. It was so good.
Good idea. Okay.
Yeah, so you can use them for some kind of almost in between what you would use a fresh tomato. But yeah, you're not going to get this. They get real juicy. Yeah. So they make a great tomato juice, or add it to anything liquid. Mm-hmm.
So they would not be good on a sandwich.
No.
That was great. Thank you again, Janice. We really appreciate you being a part of our virtual coffee break. I know you were a little apprehensive, but I do appreciate you being here. Again, it is getting ready to be, for the average consumer, I guess, time for people to start looking at what they're going to put in their spring gardens in summer. So it was great to have those little bit of tips, and to know that the Mattawoman Farms is organic, and they do have a CSA. They are also fantastic community partners. They donate to the food bank year round, as well as give us those helpful tips that we've always been able to pass on to other people. So thank you, Janice, for that. We greatly appreciate you and Rick.
And the other thing I'd want to share too, that I probably should have thought of sooner, is that a lot of, not all of the time, but frequently we have extra transplants. Rick might start more than he absolutely needs for something. So if you're doing a community program like a kid's garden or something, and you have a need for something like that, shoot us an email or let us know, and we'll try to save some things for you if we can. We've done that with the garden there in Cape Charles, New Roots, in the past. And when I was working for the library, we provided all the transplants for the kids' garden there at the Northampton Free Library. But yeah, if you're working with a group that you want to do something like that, let us know too. We'd be more than willing to try to help out.
Great.
Yay.
Thank you again, Janice. And our winner today is Hannah. So Hannah will be sending you out a prize just for being part of our virtual coffee break. I greatly appreciate everybody being with us today and taking the time to stop and just kind of chill out with Janice and learn all about a little bit about Mattawoman Farms, which again is a great resource for the Eastern Shore community. So with that, I'll give you all the rest of your day back, and hope you all have a fantastic weekend, because it is the end of the day on Thursday. And I don't know about y'all, but I have been looking forward to the end of the day on Thursday and Friday for a whole week now. So you guys take care, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.